Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Boy, does it smell good.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
That's good.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio, this is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Thursday. It means we're brought to you by Rouse's Markets. Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. We're working towards the weekend. Luke Johnson from Saintsland at 1:15. That's 15 minutes from right now. Obviously, lots to get to on that front with Luke. We got a college football playoff semifinal tonight, and I'm excited about it. I don't have a rooting interest. I don't have to give a lot of emotional investment into it. I can just sit back and watch and see who wins. I'm very much looking forward to that. I've got a piece up at LouisianaSports.net right now. LSU basketball problems. Are they fixable? I'll give you some of that at the end of hour number one. Dennis Allen sat down, did a podcast with Jay Glazer this week, and we'll hear some of that sound at 2 o'clock about the day that he was fired, about his thoughts on his time as the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. I think it's very interesting. So we'll hear from Dennis Allen a little bit later. Chris Blair, the voice of the Tigers, with us back from cold Columbia, Missouri, but headed up to probably pretty cold Oxford, Mississippi coming up this weekend. We'll talk hoops with Blair, and then we'll do some LSU football in the second hour as well. Plenty to get to here on this Thursday. Appreciate you hanging out with us. Let's get things started the way they get started every day, that Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
Ross Dellinger has got an awesome piece up at Yahoo. I'm going to talk about it for the next 10 or 12 minutes. I would highly suggest you go read it, because I could not in any way go into the depth that he has gone to in this piece, in this segment. And I'm just going to kind of tear off from it and talk about LSU within it. So if you want like the whole scheme of things, highly suggest you go check out Ross's piece. It's titled, "With NIL Era Ending, College Sports is on the Verge of Seismic Change. How will schools adapt with industry in upheaval?" And here is, I'll boil this down like as far as I can condense it. We used to do an exercise in journalism school when I was in college where they would give us a news article, and we would have to cut it in half. And then you'd have to cut that in half. And then you'd have to cut that in half. And then all of a sudden you'd have one sentence. You would take the entire article and boil it down to a sentence. I'm not going to boil this long article down into one sentence, but this is basically the nuts and bolts, surface level on this story by Ross. Basically, right now it's the wild, wild west. You got boosters, and they're deciding we're just going to pay players an unlimited amount of money, and we're going to shape our football, basketball, baseball, soccer, lacrosse teams however we want to shape them. Here we go. There's the cash. That's what we're doing right now. Revenue sharing is imminent, and when that comes, there will be some guardrails on. You will have a pile of money that is created by the athletic department. The athletic director will kind of earmark, this goes here, this goes there. The players will get their fair share. You've got Title IX concerns that deal with it, and that is coming. And the question is, can you rein in further the wild, wild west? There is a proposal, and this is not to a T, but this is how I read it in my interpretation of the proposal on its face. Okay, we're going to have revenue sharing. And you'll have this pool of money, and Ohio State's will be bigger than Toledo's, and LSU's will be bigger than Tulane's, but you've got your share of money, and essentially LSU and Bama and Auburn and Georgia and Florida should be on level footing, and Troy and Rice and Louisiana Tech should be on the same footing. And this is kind of how we're going to try to start this. And then on top of that, players can make their NIL money outside of the revenue sharing, but it will be cleared with an NIL clearinghouse that deems what the market value is for that. In other words, I think everyone understands, and this is just using an example that's local, I think everyone understands that if Jaden Daniels comes right off the Heisman set and holds up a box of chicken with the Raising Cane's logo on it, there is value for Raising Cane's in that. It goes to social media, and you're just using a high-profile person, their name, their image, their likeness, to market your product. I had never heard of Viore 3 years ago. Never heard of it. I know what it is now because I follow Livy Dunn on social media, and she posts stuff with Vuori, and I'm watching TV, and I say, oh, there's Livy Dunn, and there's Vuori. I don't even know what else they make besides athletic wear. But clearly it's worked because Livy Dunn is in my social media and television world. She goes to school down the street from me, and she has marketed that product. She's worth something to them. And that is very easy to deal with. Now, when you've got someone who's sold their interest in an oil and gas company, okay, and has hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're just writing checks to defensive ends, is there a return on that? And that's kind of what this article lays out as the proposal of, okay, we've got revenue sharing, that's paying players. You've got these high-profile collegiate athletes across all sports that have value to businesses. We want them to be able to capitalize on that. They have to be. But there needs to be a limit, and we want to be able to deem that the money that they're getting is fair when it comes to market value. That's the proposal. And honestly, as I read that, I'm going, that makes some sense. But here's where you got to go a step further. And here's where I'm candid with y'all. Like, I'm very comfortable telling you that I thought on Tuesday night, the reach-in foul that Jordan Sears got for his third foul was stupid. I thought it was a terrible play. I'm comfortable telling you who I think Jay Johnson should start in game 1 of a regional. I'm comfortable telling you whether or not that was a good time to steal a base. I'm comfortable telling you that LSU's offensive line is not run blocking enough. You start getting into legal stuff, I'm not going to sit here and act like I know all that kind of stuff. I don't. I have to read what the attorneys say. And that's what I do. And the attorney in this case that's quoted in Yahoo Sports says, I don't understand how any person who tries to bring a suit saying that you can't, that some endorsement deal that you've got is not fair in market value, that's never going to hold up in court. You're always going to be able to pay endorsers whatever you want. That's a financial decision your business has to make. And so as I read that, I look at it and I go, well, they can't enforce this new idea. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell. It goes way further in deep, and Ross does a much better job of explaining it in all of the words in this piece than I can verbally to you in this segment. But essentially it's, okay, we got a pot of money for revenue sharing. You can make your NIL. We'd like to have a clearinghouse that deems that when you do sign an NIL and you get money, we want to see those terms, and we want to dictate that the market is fair there. And then you got an attorney saying, well, you can't do that. That's not legally going to hold up. And so my feeling on this, and again, it's just my feeling. We're all working off of the unknown, and I certainly am. My feeling is that we've opened this box, and you cannot close this box. The only way you can close this box, meaning limit the just spending on a whim, would be to create a professional sports league that has collective bargaining that looks exactly like the Major League Baseball system, the NFL system, the NBA system. Now, I know that those are different because the MLB does not have a salary cap. It has a luxury tax, and the NBA and the NFL do have salary caps, and so they're not exactly the same. But you understand how things work from that perspective with assembling a roster and how you dole out money. But there's still always that outside cash. There's a reason that Shohei Ohtani, the greatest baseball player in the history of the sport, is content to make $1 million per year from the Dodgers. Now, he's deferred $100 million, hundreds of millions of dollars down the line. But right now, he's making $1 million a year. Why is he making $1 million a year? Because he's getting endorsement deals that make that chump change, and that's what he's building his wealth off of right now. There's salary coming from the Dodgers when he's done playing, which is a bizarre way to structure things, but more power to him. But he's able to collect all that money on the outside of the salary cap, which is helping the Dodgers. And I believe that's going to exist in college football too. Basically, to boil this down, I talk about this in LSU terms all the time. I don't want LSU to have to get into a bidding war with Texas and Texas A&M every time they try to go to Houston to get a player. Houston has been very, very good to LSU over the years. And more often LSU gets into a bidding war with Texas and Texas A&M, I think that LSU is going to come up short on that. So when I look at this proposal that says, well, everybody will share their revenue, and LSU makes a heck of a lot of revenue in sports. They make a lot. So you're on a pretty level playing field with Auburn and Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee from that perspective. And then if you've got to make the endorsements count and you've got to measure market value, well, then everybody's pretty much on the same page there. LSU's got a lot of stars. They built a lot of stars over there. NIL era, not NIL era. A lot of stars come from LSU. They can make a lot of money with the profile that LSU brings them. But then there's that next piece that attorneys believe you can't legislate out of this deal, which is, okay, you got to let the businesses pay the people whatever they're willing to pay. And that's where LSU can't keep up as much with some of the other schools around the country. They're fighting to this year, but the fact of the matter is that there's a next year, and then there's a next year, and then there's a next year. And the money's just got to keep coming. And I know Texas' money's going to keep coming, and I know Texas A&M's money's going to keep coming. I know Ohio State's money is going to keep coming. As long as Larry Ellison's alive, I know Michigan's money's going to keep coming. And I don't know if LSU can continue to keep up. They can this year. They can pay Brian Kelly $100 million. They can buy Ed Ogeron out for $60. They can get the number one portal class in the country. They can do it one time and do it again and again and again. That's where my concern is always going to be resting. And it sounds like, based on the verbiage from this attorney in this story from Ross, that's never going away. You can put a system together that tries to put people on fairly even footing, but ultimately the desire of the boosters and the means that they have will always dictate who's able to spend the most. And so if I'm going to keep that analogy going with Shohei Ohtani and with the Dodgers, Texas is going to be the Dodgers. LSU is going to be the Braves. LSU is going to be the Astros. They're not going to be the Pirates. They're not going to be the Rays. But they're going to have to rely on sound talent evaluation, really strong development, and selecting who you're going to spend the money on. And while that doesn't seem wildly different from the world we're in right now, there's a proposal that would change that. It just doesn't sound like it's going to hold up. So for the third time, I'll tell you, go read the story. I think it's interesting. I know that there are a lot of people that listen that despise everything about this. I know that there are a lot of people that listen and say, hell yeah, get after it, get your money. And then you've got me and I'm right in the middle. I'm nervous about the Wild Wild West, but I certainly understand that there is value that some of these student athletes have created for themselves and that they should be able to make some money off of that. I'm in the middle. I've always been in the middle. And that's not the best for radio. The best for radio is to get on here and rant and rave and take a stance and say everybody else that's wrong, that disagrees, is an idiot. And that's the best way to go about getting people to click on stuff and things going by. It's just not my style. I'm just going to tell you what I think. And I've always told you where I started is how does it affect LSU? And I think it puts LSU firmly in the haves, not in the elite. That's what I think. Now, they're raising a lot of money, and I don't know where it's coming from. And maybe there's a lot more that I don't know about. But you're going to have to continue to try to keep up year over year over year. So all you folks that are graduating from LSU this past month or that are coming up in the coming years, get super rich. Found something that's just like Oracle and become the second wealthiest person in the world and pay for our football and baseball teams. Basketball too, please. That's my hope. But we'll see. Go read Ross's piece over at yahoosports.com. That is our Genesis opening drive. We'll chat with Luke Johnston. Who are the Saints going to hire? We'll do all that coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Audio, video, security solutions, avssla.com is that website. Security is important. Nothing really more important than the security of your house, your family. And at the Palmer House, we trust our security system with the folks at Audio Video Security Solutions. I told you earlier that last week, Mitchell Fisher and his team came out and installed a keypad for our burglar alarm in our living room, in our bedroom, so we know when the doors open in the bedroom. Well, my wife wasn't super thrilled about that this morning when I went to run at 5:40, and it told her that I opened the door and locked the door and then armed the burglar alarm when I left because it kept waking her up. But she's safe because we can handle all that through the folks at Audio Video Security Solutions. We've got keypads at the front door, keypad at the back door, cameras on both doors. If that's something that you don't currently have and would like to get into it, Mitchell Fisher and his team do it all the time, and we have been thrilled not only with the installation, but with the customer service after the installation. Mitchell Fisher's always a call away. It's a beautiful thing to have the owner of the company's phone number right there at the push of a button. His cell is 225-439-7920. Again, that's 225-439-7920. It's audio, video, security solutions. You can check them out online at avssla.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
Thursday show is brought to you by Rouse's Markets, official supermarket of the New Orleans Saints. King cake season. Rouse's got you covered on that one. They're making a lot of king cakes. In fact, their king cake crew is going to make 600,000 of them this year. So if you're looking for a king cake, I got your spot. No matter where you are, get on by Rouse's. Get them the traditional cinnamon or the flavored king cakes. They got you covered at Rouse's. All right, let's talk some Saints. Luke Johnson from The Advocate joins us to talk about the black and gold now that the season's at the rearview mirror and the real important stuff starts with the coaching search. Luke, how we doing?
Doing all right, man. Thanks for having me on.
It is our pleasure. All right, when are the Saints going to hire a coach?
You know, my colleague Matthew Paris just put together a really strong story about like how long to expect this thing to play out because of the rules in place by the NFL. So, you know, if they are interviewing a coach from a team that's still in the playoffs, which they're interviewing plenty of those, they can only do virtual, until a certain point. They can't do in person until after their team is eliminated from the playoffs. So if Aaron Glenn, for instance, is a candidate all the way through to the end, and the Lions are in the Super Bowl, the Saints have to wait until like after the Super Bowl to speak with them. So, I mean, this process could drag on for more than a month. But there's also been instances in the last couple of years where the teams had their guy after 5, 6, 7 days.
How do you feel about where the Saints sit in the marketplace here as you look across the league with the openings that you've got in Vegas and Chicago and Jacksonville and New York? And like, where do you, and certainly New England, where do you see the Saints kind of sitting and how much does that matter?
I mean, I think it does matter. I think it matters quite a bit, just especially when you're looking at how they are going to try to get out of this roster hole. I mean, it's been done before. The Eagles have done it. The Broncos did something similar this year. But it's a challenge. You have to draft really well. You have to make smart hires in your coaching staff. You have to make smart hires in free agency. So their cap situation is a big drawback. I think their ownership situation is a big plus. Like, that's why I put them ahead of the Jets and maybe even the Jaguars and the Raiders, just because those have been extremely dysfunctional organizations over the last, several years, 2 decades. I think the Bears kind of fall into a similar spot. They just have a really interesting young roster. Obviously, they've got Caleb Williams as a quarterback, and they got a bunch of cap space. They were pretty good toward the end of the 2023 season. They were pretty good toward the start of this season, and they weren't able to put a complete season together. But if they get the right guy there with all that money they can spend in free agency, I think they could turn that around really quick. And the same thing goes for the Patriots. I think those are the two clear best jobs. Patriots have like $131 million in cap space, plus Drake May at quarterback. Like they can legitimately go worst to first by making a bunch of smart acquisitions.
Are you in the camp that believes that Mike Vrabel is going to be the head coach of the Patriots and Ben Johnson is going to be the head coach of the Bears?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Just for the reasons I laid out. I think I do think that it'd be really interesting if the Patriots decided to go with Ben Johnson, like if they convince him to take that job and he's like, I really like Drake May and I really like Boston and all this cap space. I think that could be a fun wrinkle in this whole thing, but I think the chalk picks are Johnson to the Bears and Vrabel to the Patriots, and then it's just kind of wide open from there.
Do you feel like Aaron Glenn is the front runner for the Saints job?
I do. I think to me, when I'm looking at it, I think it's Aaron Glenn is like a pretty obvious front runner. And then I think I like Joe Brady kind of right behind him just because of their familiarity with him, his kind of proven success. and he's young. So I think all that stuff works in his favor. But like, there's a lot of different ways this can go. They could be bringing somebody. They could bring Mike Kafka in. I don't understand the appeal behind Mike Kafka, but he might like blow them away in the interview. And you got to remember that this is the organization that hired Sean Payton in 2006. And Sean was like a position coach. He'd been a fired offensive coordinator. He was a guy without not a really impressive resume, but he blew them away. So it's just something you got to consider when you're thinking about these things. Is they have a history of kind of ignoring that sort of stuff and looking for other traits.
What is Derek Carr's role in this entire thing? I don't mean is he helping them hire a coach? Certainly that's not the case. But I mean, do you think what role does he have in the interview process? You've talked about quarterback a number of times with the other organizations.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be a factor working against them, and it could be something working for him. I mean, I don't know. You saw, I think he played pretty good in Quinn Kubiak's offense this year. Obviously, he's not a top 5 NFL quarterback, but I think if you're a coach, you're do I have baseline functional quarterback play at the organization? Yes. Then it could work in their favor. But somebody could look at this roster and be like, I don't want Derek Carr as my quarterback, and I'm going to have to eat $50 million if I decide to move off from him this season, or he's just going to cost me $50 million to be here next year. I think it's the beauty's in the eye of the beholder in this one, because I think it really could go either way, and it could work against them or work for them.
What do you think about Kingsbury?
I think he's not going to leave that situation. I don't think any of the jobs that are available right now are slam dunks. And I think considering the way his first coaching job went, considering the way this year went with him kind of having fun coaching football again with Jaden Daniels, considering whose staff he's on, Dan Quinn waited 3 years and as one of the top coaches in the hiring cycle before he found the right position for him. I think this is just going to be a situation where he winds up back in Washington next year. But I think when you're looking at proven offensive play callers, I think he's right up there at the top.
Anybody that we haven't mentioned that you think is worth discussion at this juncture?
I think Kellen Moore is a really interesting one. I don't know if it would be what I do, but it was only 3-4 years ago when he was the Ben Johnson of his cycle. He was the hotshot young coach, and he had the Cowboys offense just really clicking, and it kind of fell apart for him a little bit. But he had a revival season in Philly. I think he's a really interesting candidate. I don't know if he fits the culture setter, culture builder type coach. And that might be what the Saints are looking for. But in terms of offensive play calling, I think he'd do a lot worse than him.
Last one here, Luke. Appreciate a little bit of time. Do you believe Mike McCarthy's back in Dallas, and how would that shake things up if he's not?
I'm going to go yes.
Okay.
And I think that just kind of leaves it at where it's at. I mean, if he doesn't come back, and that's definitely a possibility, I think he would be interviewing here. I think the Saints would really like an opportunity to speak to him because, there's a lot of flaws with the coach, right? Especially with the playoffs. But he's won 62 or 63% of his games as an NFL head coach. Even in Dallas, he's got a very, very good regular season record there. So he's somebody who knows how to win. I think that's something that would be sought after here.
Luke, we appreciate some time, man.
My pleasure.
Luke Johnson with The Advocate at by Luke Johnson on Twitter for all your Saints coaching search needs. He's got you covered over there at The Advocate. I'm with him there. I understand that the Cowboys have lost playoff games, but there's value to me in a coach who can win 12 games 3 years in a row. And it kind of goes back to my college baseball thing that I have a hard time thinking there are a lot of coaches out there that are really good at winning games in April that just can't win them in June. I think if you're really good in the regular season, you should be pretty good in the playoffs. I understand, yes, if you're a coach that's winning a lot of games in the NFL in October, you might be playing some bad teams, and you don't play any bad teams in the playoff, and I understand that correlation. But the NFL has a lot of good players and a lot of good coaches, and there aren't that many times where you can just roll the ball out there and beat teams. It just doesn't happen that much. I would suggest the Packers did that with the Saints this year, but it doesn't happen very often. And I think that Mike McCarthy is a really good coach. And the fact that they've lost some playoff games. I mean, Aaron Rodgers makes that absurd throw across his body down the left sideline to beat him one time. And I mean, it's I think that Dallas would be foolish to kind of move on. And this is another comparison outside of the NFL that I make all the time. Sometimes you have Mark Richt and you fire him and you get Kirby Smart. Most of the time you have Philip Fulmer and you hire 3 guys in a row that can't do squat. So that's just kind of the nature of the way sports go. We're, as Luke alluded to at the front of that interview, I think we're a long way from the Saints finding their head coach. I think you're talking about the end of January before this is all said and done. I think it's obviously been fast and furious on the front end of this with New Orleans. We're in a never-ending text chain for LouisianaSports.net, and every time there's a story coming or every time there's a story that's filed, we get it, and so that just never stops day to day. That's just part of my job is in the text thread, and Ross has a different name that he's writing a piece on like every 3 hours. That's not going to continue for 3 weeks, but once they get their initial group and they start to whittle things down, there'll be, as the weeks go on, there'll be an increasing number of guys they can get in person with. And then you'll whittle that group down very, very narrow. Some of the other jobs may fill first here or there. They may not, just depending on who's hiring who. But I think we're a little bit away. We're just trying to get that initial group. And I say this a lot as well. I'm simultaneously very much in the middle of the Saints coaching search and from afar watching the Bears coaching search. And the folks in Chicago are a little antsy because in Chicago, they're just interviewing everyone. Like they were talking yesterday, I think Matt Campbell from Iowa State is getting a phone call, which is bizarre to me. Pete Carroll's name's popped up. He's 73 years old. Like there's been a lot going on, and they're thinking that the Bears are casting too wide a net. And my thing is right now, like, what else you doing? Why wouldn't you pick up the phone and talk to somebody? What do you lose besides 2 hours of your time talking to Kellen Moore or whoever the case may be? Like, I don't know if you're, wasting anything at that point. I think you cast a really wide net. You see what happens. Now, if you're a Saints fan and your confidence is shaken in the folks who are having those conversations, that's a whole different story. But I'm good with the Saints casting as wide a net as possible and seeing what comes up. And then you find out, you put them all in the ice chest there, and then you figure out which one you want. That's kind of what we're looking at here with the New Orleans Saints. If you're looking for our Saints coverage, you can always find it, Hunt on Saints, wherever you find your podcast, certainly on YouTube as well, as we get you closer to the next era of Saints football. Let's take a time out. When we come back, we've got playoff football tonight, and I'm fired up about it. Some of the statistics are really cool, huge brands. Let's talk about it next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
All right, college football playoff semifinal at the Capital One Orange Bowl tonight, 6:30 kickoff Central Time. Notre Dame and Penn State. Looking at that line currently on ESPN Bet, the Irish a 1-point choice in the game. Notre Dame 13-1, Penn State 13-2. I'm really excited for this game, and I talked about this with last year's national championship game. I love the fact that I don't have an SEC team that I really need to root against tonight. I don't get a lot of pleasure out of watching the Tebow, Chris Leak, Florida teams play for a championship, or the Billy and Alabama teams that did it. Certainly didn't want to watch Cam play for a championship, and heaven forbid I'd have to watch Texas A&M or Ole Miss or somebody try to climb that mountain. I enjoy very much not having a huge rooting interest in the game. I don't like Notre Dame because I don't like the space they occupy in the sport to play by different rules than everybody else. They set their own schedule instead of a conference commissioner setting their schedule. I realize they kind of play in the ACC, and you've got the basketball team play in the ACC, and the women's basketball teams in the ACC, and the baseball go play in the ACC, but football's not playing in the ACC. I don't like that all of our college football playoff or BCS rules have to start with the best such and such conference or Notre Dame. I don't like that, but I don't really care about Notre Dame. So I don't. If they win tonight, that's not going to be any sweat off of my brow. And then Penn State is a non-factor to me either. You're talking about teams that last won national championships in 1986 and 1988. I was born in 1988, so they haven't won championships in my entire lifetime, and I appreciate teams that have never climbed the mountain climbing the mountain. Now, I've seen Texas win a title. Now, they haven't won that many of them, but I've seen them do it. And certainly I've seen Ohio State win a title. But fan bases that have been starving for this long, I think it's fascinating to watch. Like, I had never seen Georgia win a national title before they beat Alabama a few years back. And to watch the jubilation that they had in that game, that's just kind of cool to me. And somebody is going to win tonight, and it'll be the biggest win in a lot of their fans' lifetime. And I think that's very, very cool. So what does this game look like to me? Well, I really enjoyed, again, I reference these quite often in these playoff games. Bill Connolly just does a great job breaking down these games with advanced analytics. I can't necessarily tell you how he conjures up all the advanced analytics, but I can interpret them when he puts them pen to paper. And so you talk about Notre Dame's offense against Penn State's defense. This is very fascinating to me because Notre Dame thrives on the run game, specifically explosive runs. Notre Dame is 26th in the country in rush success rate, which is the percentage of runs that go for successes, 3+ yards or getting a first down. And so 26 is very good, but they're much better in yards per carry. They're second, which indicates that, they do a good job of keeping the ball going forward, but they do get chunk plays a lot as well. You got Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, who both average gaudy numbers. Jeremiah Love, who did limp off against Georgia, we'll see how healthy he is tonight, but he goes for 7.3 yards per carry for the season. He's number 3 in the nation in yards after contact. Jadarian Price, 6.5 yards per carry on the year. He's tops in the nation in yards after contact. That's some impressive stuff. Now, the run game's really good. Penn State's run defense, good. 9th in the country in yards per carry allowed. They held a physical Illinois team. I get it. It's Illinois. But Brett Bielema's a good coach. They can run the ball. Held them to 34 yards on 32 carries. Now let's talk about the teams with the real talent. Because Notre Dame's got talent running the ball. They held Ohio State to 4.5 yards per carry. I mean, they got 176 yards, Ohio State did, but it took them 40 carries to get there. So that's an okay result. It's not dominant. It's not getting gashed. Oregon, 186 yards on 41 carries. 4.5 a carry. Not getting gashed, not excellent, but, solid. They held Ashton Genty to 104 yards because it took him 30 carries to get to 104 yards. That's a pretty good job. And what Penn State does better than anybody in the country to this point is red zone defense. They're the best red zone defense in America. All of that said, they didn't get enough stops against Oregon. And that's the best team outside of Ohio State that they have played this year. And they lost those 2 games. And I'm not going to throw them a ton of bouquets for beating SMU and Boise. We got that. Here's the other side of this coin, though, on the offense. We know that Notre Dame wants to run it. We know that Penn State's got a pretty stout run defense. Notre Dame's passing offense, to me, is atrocious. It's awful. Riley Leonard's tough, and he runs for tough yards, and they do enough to win, and he's gritty and he's gutty, but he can't throw. He completed 2 balls in the Sugar Bowl that traveled 10 yards or more. They didn't throw for 100 yards. And I guess it's because I'm programmed to the last 5 or 8 years of college football where everybody's scoring a lot of points, but I just can't get past that with this Notre Dame team. Maybe they can win it, grinding you to a pace on defense, running the ball, and having a tough quarterback get 4 yards on 3rd and 2. it doesn't fit this era to me. And maybe we're transitioning eras. I'm not saying that's impossible, but I just struggle with that so much. When you look at Notre Dame's defense, that's legit. Like, you go to the other side of the football, Notre Dame's defense is legit. I don't know how this is calculated, but it seems good. Of the 20 players in the playoff, the top 20 players in the playoff in havoc rate, Notre Dame's defense has 8 of them. So guys that are creating disruption, getting into the backfield, tackles for loss, sacks, creating negative plays, they've got a bunch of guys that are doing that on their defense. Penn State's offense, good on the ground, a lot of short passing game, lean heavily on Tyler Warren, who's very good. But who else you got? And we know, based on games against Texas A&M and Georgia, who aren't elite on the outside, but do have 4-star recruits like Penn State does, Notre Dame covers really well. Really well. So a lot of this is geared toward the ground game and defense. And that's why the over-under number is obviously very low at 44.5. I would still lean under in this game. I don't think Notre Dame's going to create a ton of explosive plays. I don't think Penn State's got the guys to create those as well. Warren's not going to do it. He's a tight end. He creates some separation. He does have, 1,158 yards and 8 touchdowns. This game feels under to me. And I'll leave you with my pick here. I just can't get past Notre Dame's passing offense. That to me seems like too big a weakness. And to me, it seems like a bigger weakness than Penn State's history playing elite teams. What did I say Penn State SMU game? I said, this is not, Penn State's issues are not because the stage is too big. It's because the opponent's too good. SMU's not that. They weren't. Just throwing pick sixes like people giving out Skittles on Halloween. Boise State, not very good football team, period. They're just not. Genty, very good. Going to be a good pro. Deserves to be at the Heisman Trophy ceremony? Absolutely. Good player. Boise State, not a good team. Should never even be in the playoff. So you're not going to get any credit from me for that. But I do think Penn State's got enough talent to be on this stage. And I don't think Notre Dame is what those Michigan teams, those Ohio State teams, that I don't think they're of that talent level and ability level. And I don't think they are at quarterback either. Penn State's problem is not stage, it's opponent. When you play the beast teams in college football, you're not good enough. I don't think this Notre Dame team is a beast team in college football. I think Notre Dame is a good team. And if Riley Leonard goes out there and throws for 116 yards tonight, I think they'll lose. And I think he will. I don't think he's going to throw for 196 and 2 touchdowns. If he proves me wrong, have at it. I cannot wait to watch the game. Great scene down at the Orange Bowl. Weather's going to be better there than it is everywhere else in the country right now. You got 2 iconic uniforms. Yes, I'm going there with uniforms. And you've got 2 fan bases dying, starving to get to that next level. Because you've got the 60-plus-year-olds that know what it could be, and then you've got the 30-year-olds that have lived and died with this for 20 years and have never seen this before. That's cool to me. I'm excited to watch it. So we'll talk a little bit more about it in the second hour, but I've got Penn State tonight. So give me the Nittany Lions plus the point. I don't know. I guess I can push, but I'll take the Nittany Lions plus the point. All right, we got one segment to go here in hour number 1. Our Thursday show is brought to you by Rouse's. When we come back, are LSU basketball's problems fixable? I've got some thoughts on that. We'll do it next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
College football Twitter is ablaze right now, so we'll kind of shift courses and close out the hour with this breaking news from Pete Nakos over at On 3. Carson Beck has entered the transfer portal, and everybody's going nuts. Texas Tech, Miami, Ohio State, among the teams that are being ballied about for Carson Beck. Here's my thought immediately when I saw the news. Y'all probably don't even remember this, but Thatcher Hurd entered the transfer portal last year before the draft. And everyone's like, why is he into the transfer portal? Isn't he going to go to the draft? Why would he leave? He should come back. And I'm going, I don't think he's going to use it. But you're not punished for entering the transfer portal. And if he wanted to explore something else after the draft, then he could. And last year, Thatcher Hurd got drafted and signed for high six figures and didn't transfer anywhere. So Carson Beck to me, because the transfer portal window is closed for Georgia. So he would have to enter in the spring and not this portal window. So he couldn't go anywhere right now. I think he's just going to go through the draft process, which he's already declared for, and someone will pick him in the second round or something, and he'll go into the NFL. But if people are scared about the UCL injury and the Tommy John surgery, which, by the way, is supposedly far less significant for a quarterback than a starting pitcher. If the NFL teams balk at that, well, you create a bidding war. And you are full well, you can go back to Georgia if you want. If Miami's willing to pay up, and he was dating one of the Cavender girls at one point, if he's going back there, and I don't even know where they are at this point, then he can do that if he wants. But to me, my gut instinct when I hear Carson Beck's in the transfer portal is, well, why wouldn't he be in the transfer portal? There's money to be had. He's clearly making a lot at Georgia because he's got a ridiculous car. But he'll get drafted in the second round and he'll just go. That's what I think is going to happen. I think Hurd went to the Yankees, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that's what's going to happen. Now, there's a lot of talk that Carson Beck would be the top pick in the draft as of September. And then he got the turnover bug real bad, and it just didn't go quite well. He cleaned it up a little bit late in the season, and then he got hurt. And so it wasn't the season he expected that he was going to have. But everybody's going nuts on Twitter saying, oh, if he ends up here. And I'm just kind of sitting back going, he's going to end up with the Rams. Like that's where he's going. I don't think he's headed to Miami. I don't think he's headed to Ohio State. The conversation has changed a little bit because you can make more money as a college quarterback than you can as a third-round draft pick who you may or may not make the team. That part has changed in the last 4 years with the NIL. And maybe that's his plan. But this is a late decision and one that I think is just kind of a safety net. And there's nothing, you don't get hurt from casting a safety net. I don't think that the Vikings and the Chargers and the Falcons are going to look at him and go, well, this guy is kind of quitting on his team here. I am not sure about that. No, I think that you're looking at a situation where he's just keeping every option that's available to him open. He's got an option to go back to Georgia. He's got an option to go to the draft. He's got an option to get in the transfer portal and go wherever he wants, and there will be money waiting for him wherever he goes. There's money at Georgia. There's money at Miami. There's money at Texas Tech. There's money at Ohio State. There's money with the Cleveland Browns. Like, wherever he wants to go, there's money. And he's a big dude with a big arm and a lot of talent, and I just don't necessarily see this as a huge story. Now, you're looking at the same guy who told you I didn't think Bryce Underwood's huge NIL offer was a huge story, and I looked like a freaking idiot that day. So I'm willing to look like one most days. But that was my first instinct when I saw that pop up on Twitter. I've got my buddies text me saying, why would he go in the portal? He's at Georgia. Well, why wouldn't you? There's no punishment for going in the transfer portal. You just keep every option available. So again, Carson Beck's entered the portal. It's closed for Georgia right now, so he can't literally get in until the spring window, which is after spring practice. So again, he can't even go through spring practice with a new team. I just have my doubts as to whether or not this is actually going to come to fruition. I believe his name will be called at some point, second day of the draft, and I believe that will be his future in football. If not, more power to him. Go wherever you need to go. I don't know how Georgia fans will feel about that. Don't know how they feel about Gunnar Stockton. Don't know how they feel about Carson Beck, but that's the news of the day, at least. He's headed into the transfer portal. That story will be up at LouisianaSports.net pretty quickly here. Speaking of LouisianaSports.net, I got a new series going on called Portal Profiles, where I'm profiling every single entrant into the transfer portal for LSU and kind of giving a 3-part synopsis of that new player. It's a what do we know, what's the fit, and then my projection for what that player is going to do. T-Bob's talking about it on the morning shows. Did Jakeem Jackson yesterday from Florida, Barry Brown today from Kentucky. So if you're interested in reading some of that with football, go to LouisianaSports.net and check it out. Our Thursday show is brought to you by Rouse's. Looking for a king cake? They got lots of king cake at every single Rouse's, like right when you walk in the door. They're everywhere. Check those out. They bring you our Thursday shows each and every week. All right, let's come back and talk some football. Coming up next on The Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge. GenesisofBatonRouge.com is that website. When you think Genesis, think luxury. It's a luxury vehicle. get behind the wheel. You won't question it anymore. They're phenomenal, phenomenal vehicles. They are sleek and stylish. They're comfortable. They drive exceptionally well. They're very, very safe, and they come at a reasonable price. Genesis is fairly new to the game here in Baton Rouge as older dealerships go. They're right there at Airline and Pico. Only been there a little over a year and a half, so you probably haven't been by. Highly suggest you stop on by Genesis of Baton Rouge. You can work with their phenomenal brand ambassadors that'll get you behind the wheel of one of those awesome vehicles, help you test drive it. And once you become a Genesis driver, how about a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty? How about 3 years of complimentary maintenance? It's all part of being a Genesis driver. You can check them out online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. That's online, genesisofbatonrouge.com.